this is an area that I felt very strongly about for a long time, because as a sports scientist, it had always been really obvious, and the data on this has always been really clear. There's certain risk factors, and the risk factors have changed. They've lightened them down a bit. It's become a little bit more commercial, but there's always been an issue. The whole idea about helping people live longer. But say with my friend's passing and going from a heart attack, it made me focus a lot more on it and go, look, there has to be something done here, and there has to be a way of bringing this to the forefront. Now, you may say, look, you know, when you're looking at how you can create longevity, it's pretty much a done deal, isn't it? Really, you know, you live, you die. There's all this whole circle of life. We've had like a cartoon lion sing about it. You know, you've got this whole thing that's there. So what is there that's new in this? Is there anything we can actually do about it? Is there any change in what's been happening? And I think, you know what, that there is. If anybody here has, you know, when I started to join together what I've read over the years, and even down to the fact that any of you have read Sapiens or Homo Deus, or looking at the kind of our evolution as a population, one of the reasons here is we've got to a point where the kind of speed of the society developing has outrun our evolutionary adaptive process. Our body just can't keep up with it anymore. Before, these used to be changes in seasons. You get an ice age, the body will adapt, and that's what it's done for centuries. But now it's going a lot quicker, and our body can't deal with it. The other element here is we are getting to one of these times in history where we have got more people over the age of 65 than ever before. So people are more interested in it now in a Western world. They've suddenly gone, hold on a minute, oh, this is me. If you look at how the curves, they started like this with the populations, male and female, on the younger ages, and it kind of went like this. But gradually it's changing the other way and it's going up like this. Now, some of this has to do with medicine. There's been massive advances in medicine during this kind of evolutionary phase. But ironically, that's probably why there's more 65-year-olds, because the changes in medicine. So people are looking at this and they're more interested in it. What we're starting to look at now is, I'm going to touch on, sorry, I'll just use this to keep me on track, otherwise you guys are going to be here till about 12 tonight. What we're going to look at tonight is we're going to look at the difference between health span and lifespan. Bit of a fluffy title, health span, but does anyone know the difference between lifespan and health span?
Quality of life.
Yeah, it really is. It's quality of life. One is your length of your life, and others the quality of life. And some of the issues we're getting now that people are living longer is the fact that you don't really want to live longer if you can't do what you want to do at that age. And this is why what we'll talk about tonight is so prevalent, is the fact that you kind of need to start preparing a little bit early. So the barriers to health span. So what are we talking about? What's stopping us from living longer? And has anybody here read Peter Attia's Outlive? Definitely worth the read. And I'll give you a book list afterwards, because unfortunately I have to spend a lot of time driving, so I spend a lot of time going through books. Now he's a very, very clever man. Started off as a surgeon, worked in fine. He's just a brain, and he got fed up with short death. He said, we're just dealing with short death because people are dying 30 years ago, and it was taking that long to actually get to the point. So he wanted to do something about it, and he gave these risk factors, or this kind of these barriers to our health span. He gave them personas. So he called them the 4 horsemen. Any idea what the 4 horsemen may be? What do people generally die of at the moment? Cancer. Heart disease, the biggest killer, number 1. Alzheimer's and dementia. And there's another one that costs the NHS £2 million an hour. Diabetes. Yeah. Related to obesity. Well, yeah. So that's what he identified as the 4 horsemen. Now, the advantage with that, it's kind of made it a bit more, people have picked up on it. We actually get people coming in. I spoke to a sports scientist up north this afternoon, and he does VO2 tests like us, and he was saying he's getting people coming off the back of the book because they can kind of understand it. When I was explaining it, it was very dry. When this guy gives it a bit more kind of spin on it, and it makes sense. The thing is, the four horsemen don't work on their own. You very rarely get one without the other. But also, when we talk about intervention, as we go into it and we try and increase this health span, there are things we can do to affect all of them all at once. Now, there are harbingers to the horsemen, which is generally what people will call metabolic disease. Okay, and there's 5 of those. Now, let's have a go. Metabolic disease, 5 risk factors. Anyone have a go at that? Smoking is not one, but actually it should be. It's on the American College of Sports Medicine risk factors, but that would be a risk factor. No, not alcohol. High blood pressure is one.
Sedentary lifestyle.
No, but that's on the American College of Sports Medicine. What they've done, they've dumbed some of these down to actually make it so people go, oh, I've got 5, I can deal with it a lot easier. Because if they did too many, everybody would have it. They've done this a few times. They started off and go, oh, crap, let's change that. And now only 70% of the population have got it. Okay. Cholesterol, but not just cholesterol. They put it as a lower than recommended high density lipoprotein, good cholesterol. What do we have? Obesity. A girth diameter of above 102 centimeters for men and 88 centimeters for women. One more. No, 2 more. And these generally, the thing is, what we get as we start to look through this, it's all quite entwined. So one is the fact it's your elevated resting blood glucose, the cause, or one of the causal effects of diabetes, and we look at that, but that also has to relate to girth diameter. And the other one is high triglycerides, which is a bit of an odd one, because that's circulated fat in your cells. And as we start to look through, and from the work, the investment we've done here, and the work we've done here, we've kind of gone and dug into this much more deeply and looked at it and gone, well, you know what? Let's try and get this so we can make a difference to it, because what you get with these factors is they're casting a net to see if anyone picks up on it, and then they'll intervene with them more. But the net is quite broad. So metabolic disease then. So what's the issue? So if you've got, out of those 5, how many do you think you need to have before you classified as having metabolic disease or metabolic syndrome and put at risk? More? The copy of this afternoon when I did it, the guys gradually got there. Anyone else? 3 then. Okay. So you need 3 out of the 5. So they're giving you a fighting chance with this. Okay. But remember, very often when someone's got one, they've pretty much got the others as well. So how many people in the UK got metabolic syndrome? Out of 4?
2.
Well, it's not that bad yet, actually, which we were surprised with, because we had the Icelandic dietitian popped in the other day, and she was amazed how few it was. It's 1 in 4 people have metabolic syndrome. Still quite a lot. That doesn't mean that there are other people who haven't got 2 risk factors or 1 risk factor. It just means all 3, and probably they could have up to 5. That is 1 in 4 of the British population. 120 million Americans have got it. Not surprising. The other thing that is a little bit surprising is 20 to 40% of people who have metabolic syndrome aren't obese. So it isn't necessarily just a factor of how much weight you're carrying. They have the list they've given you here, and again, I'm not going to dig too deep in this because I'll keep going all night. But it is the fact that when you talked about smoking, there's also other risk factors that sit in here you can't do anything about. Your age, smoke. Well, you can do smoking, but smoking isn't on there. The age at which your parents died, of if they had a heart-related disease, that was in there, and it's in the American ones. It's just not in this group here. So we have to consider them as we go through. Now, the group they've given there, I think they put that group together because they've all got something in common. They're all preventable. So that's quite a good thing. I think that's why they've done it. They haven't done it say, oh, your father died before the age of 55 from a heart disease, so you are a risk factor. Yes, you are, but they didn't put it in that group. So they've given people a target they can work with. So the question I set out to the guys this afternoon when I ran this speech for them was, look, so we've got this metabolic syndrome, right? You're all here tonight, so you must be aware of it, and it's something worth listening to, which so you can choose at the end. But why aren't people making a difference with it? Why aren't they doing anything about it? And when I start looking at this, they're really not. You know, I chatted to one of the chaps who's in the government, and he was having a conversation with the person who was at the time dealing with the health for the whole nation, and they're just like going, they're trying whatever they can, you know, 20 million weight loss injections or whatever, because it's out of control. So if we've got this knowledge, why aren't people doing anything about it? Any guesses?
How do you know you've got it anyway?
Yeah, we'll go over that.
Apathy.
Apathy, a little bit.
Like time for, because
Yeah, well, we talk about, then I'd asked, how many people know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs here?
Education.
The education's a good one, actually, but I sat down with a GP once and went through this, and no clue. But anyway, that's another subject. Yeah, there's some really interesting reasons for this, and I actually, again, to get back to my poor friend, but I made some changes after he passed away, and the GP's reaction was very interesting, and I'll go through it. It's covered in this a bit. The first one is a lack of knowledge about what's significant. So what you get here is it's one of these things, they don't know what really counts. Which are the big ones here, and which one do I really want to make a difference to? It's you know, we're much better programmed to think about, you all know about red wine's good for you and dark chocolate's good for you, and we kind of get those, but we kind of miss out on the other stuff. What you talked about is that people don't believe they can make a difference. Is they're just getting to the point where, and until I did it, you know, I changed my blood pressure from 160/80 to 115/65 when I was in hospital in 3 months. I brought my blood pressure from my cholesterol from 7 to 4.6 in a month, and it wasn't medicated. It's not that I'm against medication. It was just I applied the science. I brought my resting heart rate from 80 to 60. To the extent when I had my operation on my knee, they went, well, "You've got a heart issue because you've got quite a low heart rate for a big guy." So it's things that it wasn't until I did. I looked at it and went, "Hold on a minute." Well, and when I sat with the doctor and went, "Well, what's going on? Why aren't more people doing this?" And she was very much of the fact that, you know, either they don't want to, they're happy to have a pill, or, you know, they're not going to do what you're going to do and they're not going to believe it. A lot of time there's a lack of bringing it all together. You kind of know cholesterol's bad. You kind of know you shouldn't have that cake. You kind of know if you've got high blood pressure, that's not a good thing. But no one seems to be getting hold of it. Even when I went through and looked at Bupa and Nuffield, and they do a health assessment. It's the same health assessment they did 20 years ago. But they're not actually saying, all right, now let's actually bring this together and do something about it. Something that you guys brought up, it's people aren't aware of the consequences. And this is what the Matt, who was sitting here earlier, he said the short-termism. We're not very good at doing that, at throwing it forward. So and also there's some things we don't want to know. You know, so atherosclerosis is the biggest killer, much more than lung cancer. But you don't get a picture of someone in a morgue on the back of a dairy milk, do you? So, you know, there is this, we're not even doing that. And I'll discuss why they don't put it on dairy milk for the obvious reason, because it ruined Christmas. I talked a little bit about the rapidly changing landscape and evolution. I'm not going to get into the monkeys and fructose. I can tell that's a story afterwards. But there's been we've adapted to being in a situation where we didn't have much food, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of food. I mean, quickly within 100 years. But we haven't adapted back yet. And there's a few things we'll talk about as our body just can't deal with what's happening. Even its protective mechanisms are getting so overloaded, they're becoming the problem. The UK system and most developed systems are set up for fast death. They're set up for triage. They're really good at that. Yeah. They're really good if you get run over or, you know, you fall out of a tree. That's big tree. Netball, they were brilliant. Yeah, apart from that, they got it wrong. But anyway, the people who got it right were great. They're not very good on slow death. I mean, on the slow side, because a lot of times they don't have much money. they've almost been pushed into a triage situation, and the rest they're trying to do something about, which is a lot of this is going to come down to us. And when I worked for the Americans, I was doing this 30 years ago because I was trying to keep very, very rich people alive. They were very good at that because they were making millions every day, merchant banks. The reliance on pharmaceuticals. I think we do come, this is what the doctor said. She said people are much more, they want to know why they haven't been given something. They don't go in to go, well, I haven't got anything. I'm now going to eat fibre and more oat bran. She said they're disappointed if I don't give them something. It's almost back to the old placebo situation. And sometimes we aren't applying ourselves to the right bits. So I said about the health assessment, some of them, they kind of tell you, but they don't really get in there and say, look, you really need to do this. It's not like a policeman stopping you when you've got bald tires, which it really should be. They should be going, it's not if you pop your tire, it's when you pop your tire. The intervention levels are a little bit late, as we talked about. And this isn't, the measuring people's VO2 or their oxygen uptake has made me very aware of this. Measuring fit people, which has been quite interesting, is, and I had we were up at Kent University a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to the head of sport up there, and I said, the great thing is I've gone from sports science, I've been a sports scientist, and I've worked in hospitals and lectured and banks and all this type of thing, being a sports scientist. I then came into entertainment fitness, where I kept people occupied, I made them feel better, I made them do personal training, and I'm back to sports science. I said, a lot of the industry is caught in entertainment and fitness. It's not, and I was testing one of these ladies, been to these Barry boot camps and all the rest of the stuff, and they turned up and they were, they're quite scary. And it's with Blackheath, not scary. And it was the situation where her VO2 wasn't fantastic, but she goes to this boot camp and she works at 180 beats a minute, and she would literally rip doors off. But what was happening is they were kind of getting to where they needed to be to get the fitness, and they come back down because they've got to bounce the ball up and down, or they've got to do the splits, or they've got to do something more entertaining. It's a bit like trying to bake a cake and keep opening the door. You just get there, you open the door and have a look, close it again. So you never actually get. So, and it's almost like the 10,000 steps. Really? That's going to do absolutely jack. It might help a little bit, but when you look through the factors, we're kind of just putting a bit of a band-aid on. We're going, all right, that lot can do 10,000 steps. They're so occupied doing 10,000 steps, not going to come to me. So I think, and this is again, this was a discussion I had with the head of sports science, was the fact that to train to get it effective, some of the times it takes a little bit of thought, it takes tailoring, and it takes work. But it's much easier to, I had a chat the other day, I said, how do you pick your Peloton workout? So I find the most attractive woman and I follow her. I was like, okay, well, at least it gets you doing it. His words were slightly more graphic, but I'll just turn that one down. This is where a lot of the research has been. You're not in a fair battle. All right, this you trying to change your health span, trying to change the way you eat. You are a very select few in this room. Most people don't know what's happening to them. Now, there's the two doctors of the twins. I always forget their names. These come out with a book called Ultra Processed People. And that is a bit of a rip-off of a very good book called Salt, Fat and Sugar, which was absolutely spot on. And they talk about the history of food and what's going on. And they talk about the fact that, the question I gave to the guys earlier that they didn't get, actually. No pressure. Over the last 20 years, 10 to 20 years, which industry has bought up more of the large food companies than anybody else?
Industry.
That was the first answer. It's not, but they're baddies. Close, but they've been bought up by them. Whose industry has shrunk? The cigarette companies literally had a chunk of cash and went, hold on a minute. Where can we carry on doing what we're doing? So a lot of the large food companies, they got invested in by the cigarette companies. It's just when you read Salt, Fat and Sugar, and if you want a big read or you've got a long journey, it's definitely worth a read because it goes through the whole evolution of food and very, very clever. And they talk about the fact that they go, the food companies are some of the largest owners of MRI scanners. So when your food is made, and actually they very often they bleach and deodorize it now, and then they rebuild it. So, and you're not talking about just fat, salt, and sugar. You're talking about different molecules in fat, salt, and sugar. And they analyze sound, taste, color, texture, smell. They go through the whole lot, and they see what your dopamine levels are and what's stimulating you. So that's how your foods are created, and they can do them pretty cheaply because they're just taking base foods and it's kind of melting it down and just reconstituting it, building it into something, whether it's your chicken nuggets or whatever it is. But you know, we're kind of in that situation, and there was a book again 10 or so years. The funny thing is, all of this knowledge I've had and what I've learned over the last 10-15 years is all piled up against this and gone, really? Because on its own, it was like, yeah, that sounds interesting. But there was a book called The Rise of Superman. And The Rise of Superman was about, it was off the back of salt, fat, sugar, but it was about these extreme athletes. One of the guys who jumped the Eiffel Tower, the Great Wall of China on a skateboard. You know, the guys who surf these waves that are your mind would boggle. But they spend years and years and years preparing for this one stimulating event. And what it does, it gets them in the zone. If any of you have ever been in a car accident or something like that and the whole world slowed down, that's what happens to them. So they'll build themselves into this point where they get this stimulation. And basically what they were saying was the fact that what's happened is the world has gone totally inverse to that. So the food industry and how we're doing things is set up to constantly stimulate ourselves, to constantly reward ourselves, to constantly kind of feel that euphoria about what we're eating. Now, you know, I'm the son of an alcoholic. I know what addiction looks like. That's addiction. I watch it. I sat close this so she's not watching. Sorry, love. My wife. She sat and ate a whole big bag of popcorn. Does I like popcorn? So, well, do you like popcorn? She went, no. But it was sweet and salt. They weren't even hiding it. No, you keep eating and keep eating and keep eating. And what you're starting to get into, got anybody idea how long it takes? This is American stats. Apparently the British is slightly slower. The guys didn't get this time right. But how long does it take from going into a fast food restaurant in the States, from getting there to sitting down with your meal? Any idea? Minutes?
3 minutes.
3, 4, 2, apparently. So from going in, now what you're in, and you're in a situation now where it's cheaper. It probably tastes better, unless you can actually got the knowledge to cook. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to clean up. Someone serves you. And this was a Wisconsin University study. And they were just saying, you very rarely take the kids and they go, oh, no, not McDonald's again. And so you kind of, and this is what the chap that the government was dealing with. He said, what's happened is these large companies have created a feeding cycle. So it's not just the one meal. It's the fact that people are going again, and they just get in that routine. And that's the challenge they're dealing with, and they can't stop the companies from doing it. First of all, they pay a lot of tax, and I think that's what comes down to the final point. It's, you know, I said to again, one of the chaps who were over here is an intern, so he was very involved in the speech. He said, the thing you've got with fast food is wherever you go, it tastes the same. That's because they bleach it and deodorize it, and it's rebuilt as a set food. So you know what you're getting. People like routine, regardless of where you go. All right. And what we're dealing with, inverse to what we're dealing with the NHS, they got a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money. So you're not dealing with a group that is in trouble. You're not dealing with a group who's having to triage. These guys are just, and they don't care about creating the addiction because that's sales. If you ever read anything about the cola wars when Pepsi and Coke were going at each other, these guys don't play fair. They're really in for it. They're not going, oh, well, you know, the whole idea about the MRI scanner thing is the fact that the university to use the MRI scanners, they go, you can use them. We own them. You can use them, but we need you to do these studies for us. So they're very strong in what they do. They got lobbies. The sugar lobby managed to stop the UN or the World Health Organization from announcing that sugar was bad for you, because they basically got the American government to go there and said, you say that and we'll take your funding away. And that's what they did. So the World Health Organization never counted. So what you're dealing with some pretty serious people when we're talking about this. And if any of you know me, I'm an ex-doorman. I'm not a hippie. You know, this isn't. I'm not kind of going, oh my goodness, look at all these bad things. It's just the more that you see of this, it's just quite straightforward. Okay, so there is one reason why people aren't able to really deal with this health span issue, and I've given it a section of its own because it's quite important. And that's simply the fact that the four horsemen are sneaky, sneaky, sneaky bastards, and they are very, very patient, and they'll sit there and just wait for ages. And the example I've used with this now, because I think it's worth using because it's serious enough. I remember listening to a chap who'd had cancer, and even if he was in remission, he said it was like having a stranger in his house. He knew it was there. He knew this guy was waiting for him. That when if he got weaker, the guy was going to get him. And this is really what you've got to wake people up to. We're in a situation now where 15-year-olds have got fatty streaks in their blood because that's how they're eating. So you are in a situation here where when we talk about how we deal with this, and we'll get to the happy bits in a minute, I'm just doing the scary bits at the moment. We're fighting on two fronts here. One is we're fighting to keep ourselves functional as possible. And the other one is we're trying to stop the stranger in the room from getting stronger. Because what's happening more and more now is you get less functional and less able, stranger in the room gets stronger. At some point, when that crosses over, that's when people are in trouble. But they're not looking at that. Because we're not looking at where we want to be. We're just in a situation of saying, well, I'm fine now. Because you can't identify that. No one's looking for this. And it wasn't until I started working with the Icelandics and I did it myself and I worked through and I looked at this and I went, wow. No, I thought I was reasonably fun. And the two people that I've taken through this at the moment, when I took through and I did their bloods, there's more going through now. They both have metabolic syndrome. One of the three factors. He's a tall, fit guy. And he just actually talked to the Icelandic dietitian this morning. But it was the fact that he had no idea. But he'd read the book. So he'd gone, actually, you want to make a difference. Have any of you done NLP? No, this is really a really odd thing. So what we're going to do now, we're going to have a little play with your brain. All right. It's kind of like a bit like an intermission, because by now you must really be thinking, oh my God, my bum, those seats. Whoa. Well done, guys. Woo. Yes. I warned Alison, I said, get a cushion. What I'm going to do is we're going to have a little thing, because what we've got is when we talked about, we asked the definition of health span, and we talked about that. With NLP, very often what you do is you try and you play with the brain. And it's very close to kind of hypnotherapy, because the brain's really good at building scenarios. Okay, but usually we do it backwards. We say, think of a happy moment, and then we anchor you in that happy moment. But what we're going to do now, we're going to throw it forward. So what I want you to do is I want you to have a little think about what you're doing in your 80s. If you're in your 80s, let's say 85, all right, you're 85, what would you like to be doing in an ideal environment? If you're still up and running, you're still, happy with the world and you know what's going on, what would you like to be doing? Now, what I want you to do is when we do this, and there's a bit of trust in this, we're going to close our eyes for 15 seconds when we do this, okay? And it's one of those, someone will walk through, and go in the fridge. It's one of those things where I want you to put yourself in what they call first person. I want you to be there, and I want you to look around you with your eyes closed, not physically with your head, but just think about looking around you, okay? I want you to see, what you smell, what you hear, what you taste. I just want you to imagine you at that age, all right? And think about what you can do. I want you to squat up and down in your head, okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to take this finger, okay? We're going to put it on a middle knuckle. While you got your eyes closed, we're going to slide it down to the next knuckle. By doing that, I want you just to increase the light around you so you've got a much clearer idea what's around you. Your brain is very, very good at this. This is why they don't use hypnosis in court cases anymore, because if it's got any gaps, the brain makes it up, fills stuff in. So it's really good at making stuff up. All right. But it does help you visualize where you want to go with this. And I'll explain why I'm doing this. So is everyone clear on what we're going to do? We're going to have a little 15-second, close your eyes, think about it. Think about yourself moving around. Don't think yourself. I said to the guys, what are you doing while standing in a field? What were you doing? Well, people were running around me. Were you running? No. Okay, good, good. Well, I could smell a barbecue. Oh, yeah, well done. So have a little think about what you'd ideally be doing. Oh, I won't tell you what Hannah said. It was something about, yeah, oh my goodness. She said, oh my goodness, they're down here. Hannah. Are we ready? All right, so start now. Off you go. Okay, and stop. All right, open your eyes. Okay, who would like to share what they're doing? Sarah. Yeah, didn't you? Must have been the shadow.
Gardening, diving,
Yep.
swimming in the sea.
Oh, you had a great 15 seconds. I'm going to have a day out with you. Alison.
Thinking about going back to Antarctica,
Okay.
shooting in the eyes and watching all the paintings.
Oh, that's pretty cool. You got the best one so far. Anybody else, Kevin?
I was thinking about my French novel and struggling with getting up on the floor and standing up. And I was leaping up.
Perfect. Okay. And lastly, oh my goodness, Tracy. Yes. Why did you look over there? Get that, Tracy. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Now, the reason for that is when we talk about how we can make a difference to this, it's not just about analyzing your bloods and doing all this type of stuff. It's being functional enough to actually do these things. And once I started looking at it, I've met some interesting people over time. I was at Manston. They got a little cafe there called the Spitfire Cafe. It's quite nice. And there was a chap in there with 2 knee operations and a big belly on him. And I got talking to him because I'm quite shy normally, but he was nice. And he basically can't. He used to ride his motorbike there, but because he's got his knee operations, he can't do that anymore. And he can't garden anymore either. And the problem is he's just getting heavier and heavier. So his wife just brings him around. He just walked with that. And it wasn't how it was supposed to be. It was all the stuff that he really loved had kind of been taken away from him. And he wasn't the only one. I had a chap came up, poor buggy, came to sell me PR. Oh, really bad idea. Because he ended up selling him a transformation. And he needed it. And it was simply the fact that really nice man, but they all have things that stop people from going places. So it's quality of life. So it's the fact that it's about, you don't really think about that. So when we look at these factors, it doesn't take much to knock us out of kilter. And some of this is talking about having a little bit in the tank. So when we do get knocked off a path, well, like me when I did my knee and all the rest of the stuff, it can be stuff that could be life-changing. But it's just making sure that you can stay on that path. And when we talk about these factors of what we're putting in here and what we're suggesting is as much about being able to deal with the lumps and bumps as it is about doing the really obvious stuff. Okay. So what are we looking at? What can we make a difference with? Now, what I'm going to do is I'll go through the list and we'll talk about how we can work with it. I'm going to start with the main ones that we can make a difference on. I've kind of ordered them around a little bit, but they're in no no massive order because they're all quite important. Some of these things are things that we do. Some of these things are things that we find out information about and we can change. So if you're thinking about how do I improve my health span, there's a few winners straight away. Is something like your triglyceride level, is the amount of fat you have working around your system and the amount of saturated fat you have working around your system. Just due to the fact that there is an element there where if you've got a high level of fat, you're going to have some of those bad fats in there as well. Okay. The other is cholesterol. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about cholesterol. There's a lot that go. It gets a lot of bad rep, but it's really just a transport mechanism. It's what allows protein, fats, vitamins, minerals, things to transport around your system that aren't soluble in blood. But what happens with it is it's not so much the cholesterol itself, it's what it's wrapped in. And there's something called apolipoprotein B, which is what wraps around very low density lipoproteins, intermittent density lipoproteins, and low density lipoproteins. All right. Those are what we normally think of the bad cholesterol, but then it's not necessarily them, it's what wraps around them. Okay. So when we're testing, and if you look at any of the Attia stuff, is that at the moment we're not looking for apolipoprotein B. You can test for it, and it's worth looking for, but that's the baddie. Okay. Now, what you've also got with cholesterol, you've got a couple of these mechanisms. What I'm going to do, we've got a tiny bit of time, so I'm going to just run through cholesterol very, very quickly. You got to imagine that your blood vessel is like a road, okay, and you've got blood flowing through it. Your endomycin or is a little fence. So you've got a fence that your good cholesterol, your HDL, can pass through and come out the other side. But your apolipoprotein B, wrapped around your bad cholesterol, gets across that fence and gets stuck. All right. So what happens is once that's stuck there, after a while, it traps more. Now, the reason they want you to have a slightly higher HDL level is because that can go in and clear some out. Doesn't do a lot of it. And some people aren't that worried about the good cholesterol, just due to the fact that it's not causal. It's not causing the problem. It helps repair it a bit. But this is where we get in trouble, is the fact that what happens is a protective mechanism that the body sends to deal with it. It's like a little Pac-Man. That will eat up the low density lipoproteins or the apolipoprotein B, but because we've got so much now, it overloads it and it turns into a foamy mass. Now, once this foamy mass is created, if you imagine we've still got the blood vessel, we've gone over the fence, we're dealing with we're in people's houses, as it were, in that kind of that layer between your blood vessel and your blood vessel wall. The body reacts to that. So what it does is it's got a foamy layer in it. It will oxidize it. It will calcify it to protect itself. So your arteries start to harden up. And then what you also do is you get something called apo(a), which historically before would wrap round an LDL or a bad cholesterol, but it would kind of clear out all the calcium deposits or some of the calcium deposits that went through. Now we're in a situation where we have so many of them. It's a bit like having that road and your dump truck going down the middle clearing the rubbish. The dump truck gets stuck. And this is what they're also trying to see now. So what they're finding is people are still testing it's fine to test for your triglycerides, but what you really need to do is get into the apolipoprotein B test. And also, there are people who aren't actually that overweight and don't necessarily have a high level of cholesterol. We're having trouble because that apo(a), the dump truck, that was there to actually help clear it, is now becoming an issue. So there's things that weren't necessarily an issue before. So the stuff that the body's sending to actually help clear the cholesterol out is now becoming slightly more of the problem because there's just so much there.
So what's the answer?
I'll go into the answer with that. It's actually when they go through this, atherosclerosis shouldn't necessarily be a disease. We're just overcooking it. We're eating too much of the wrong thing. And that's what's available to us. And very often atherosclerosis is one of those you can't reverse. You can help it. If you read any of Dean Ornish's stuff, he's been around for ages, he managed to try and reverse it a little bit, but that was quite a strict vegetarian diet. And you can make a bit of a difference to it. But the thing with it is to just, when you're doing your eating, it's back down to the simple, not putting tons of saturated fats in there, not looking at your trans fatty acids. All this is what's causing these apolipoprotein Bs. and getting it so you're in a situation where you're overloading your system. So what we're dealing with here, again, is that kind of evolutionary period where it's very often it's an element of excess. Even down to when we talk about people fasting and that, it's that period when we're not giving our body chance to clear out the used cells. We're just layering stuff on top and top and top and top of it. We don't actually need that much food because our body can relate to it. So if we look at, if we go into that, we look at something as simple as one of the factors in here is measuring visceral fat. It's quite difficult to measure. There's a few estimations on it. A DEXA scan has a go at it, but it's really the fact you've got to think about your subcutaneous fat is how much fat you have that's ready to use. Your visceral fat is the fact that it's what happens when you've got too much subcutaneous and it flips over the top. It's kind of this is what's causing the problem. So what happens is if you eat too much fat and you keep that belly size, and this is when it relates to diabetes and they talk about girth diameter, you start getting in a situation where your fat molecules will overflow. They go into your muscle cells because you get fat layers between the muscles. The glucose can't get effectively into the muscle cells where it's stored. Most of your glucose or glycogen is stored in your muscle cells, a little bit in your liver, a little bit in your blood, and it backs and comes back out again. Then the body creates more insulin and tries to force it back out again, but it comes back again. So what you end up with is an elevated blood glucose level. And again, it's just excess. So it was explained, again, one of the books explains it as trying to blow air into a balloon that's already blown up. So what we're doing, and again, it's a difficult thing to measure because we all hold a different amount of subcutaneous capacity. So I couldn't say, oh, because you are, you've got 40% body or 20% body fat, you're so many percentage of that is visceral and so many is subcutaneous. Everyone's different. But having a decent guess at it, if you're overweight, the chances are you're going to have visceral fat in there. Does that make sense? So very often with this, it's when they're measuring this, and some of the factors that make the difference is it's a bit overarching. So it's like the fact that when we talk about aerobic efficiency, which is one of the next things here, is aerobic efficiency is, and this relates to very strongly to longevity and why the kind of whole VO2 thing has exploded and they've made it such a big thing in relation to longevity. It's basically how efficiently your system burns fat. So you got to, when we explain this to people, it's a bit like the difference between getting energy from a log and burning kindling. A lot of people, when they're exercising, burn kindling as a carbohydrate. So they don't actually get more efficient at burning that log. They just keep using that kindling. So you get in a situation where when you put under stress, the body's got to work a lot. It's got to get tons and tons of this stuff, which is throwing in the system and it's burning it really quickly. Rather than spending time being efficient and building up your ability to burn fat. So that's really aerobic capacity. So your heart over here doesn't have to work as hard because the energy, the efficiency when it reaches the muscle is that much better. So when I did this, I started on the bike at level 3 at 90 beats a minute because at 90 beats a minute, that's where I burn my most fat and where I'm aerobically efficient. I had to teach my body to be more aerobically efficient. In 3 months, I went from going level 3 on the bike at 90 beats a minute to level 14 on the bike at 90 beats a minute. So my heart wasn't having to work any better, but I had that much more efficiency at the other end. Like Michelle, she's now 3 levels up from where she started. Yeah. So it's not that she's working her heart's working any harder. And that's the whole point, is some of the people I see are in situations where they're just so used to using carbohydrates, they're not working the system efficiently. Make sense? The other one that links to that, and when we talk about the whole idea about VO2, is your capacity. Now, this is quite an issue, and this is generally what will get people, is the fact that they don't have enough of ability to match an increased workload. So it's a bit like, and I tested a chap the other day, very, very successful, but he went through the test. He's very good at burning fat at a low level. As soon as he started to increase a bit in his incline when he's walking, he stopped burning fat and just burnt carbohydrates and ran out of energy very quickly. So it's a little bit like having your body set up so you're only driving in gears 1 and 2, which is fine when you're driving around the town, but when you hit the motorway, and this is where the issue comes. So firstly, people don't have enough efficiency at utilizing oxygen and therefore burning fat. And secondly, they don't have enough capacity when their bodies push that little bit harder and the system overloads. Because if they haven't got the capacity, the only thing it's got is to increase the heart rate. And at some point it goes, you know what, oh, sorry, I've had enough. Especially if there's a blockage or there's a weakness in the wall. Blood pressure. Now, again, it's one of those things that we monitor, but it's the pressure placed on those arterial walls which starts to make all the damage that's been caused over the years. If you've had we've had the high ApoB levels, you're in situations where you've got scarring or you've got calcification. If your blood pressure's up, it just increases that scarring. One of the bits I put in here now when we're testing, and this was actually, it's an interesting one because it said if you want to get that longevity, there's something in here you wouldn't normally think about, and I put it under happiness, belonging, and purpose. If any of you looked at the Blue Zone and looked at that documentary, a lot of these people had purpose. They might have had a routine, but it was a purpose they had and the reason they had to do this. And with it, before we get down to cognitive tests for dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's just the fact that they were happy in what they were doing, and it kept them going. That's why very often when people retire, they have issues because they lose that purpose and routine. It's also the structure of how you eat. I think this is where when we talked on about the addictions and what you're doing, I've been lucky enough to be working with the Icelandic dietitian on this, and not because I need a dietitian in Iceland. It's just because the company we work with, they've been running the system for over 3 years now, and the Icelandic take is slightly different on this. A lot of it comes down to quality of food, and it's more about making sure it's nutrient dense and it isn't a mass of excess. And when we're looking at this, a lot of that, it puts you in cold turkey. It breaks you away from the process element of foods. And if you read the twins book on the ultra processed people, is the fact that a processed food is determined as something that's got more than 5 ingredients. Apparently breads, you can make bread with 4 ingredients, but most breads you look at and they've got more stuff in there. And it's when you start to add it all together, it's not just about what you're eating and the calories, it's also about how it's affecting you and what it wants you to eat more of and how it affects your system. Girth diameter, it's keeping an eye on that. Most of you are in a situation where you don't have an issue with that, but if you go to Blue Water on a Saturday and look in the food hall, and it's just a natural thing that people do. So imagine that whole idea about that. This is why the diabetes is costing what, 2.5 million an hour, because it's simply the fact that they've overloaded their subcutaneous and they're sitting in their visceral fat, and that comes back down to when we measure your fasting glucose. Now the factors I put in here, and these are the other bits that keep you going: strength and stability. It's your ability to carry on doing what you want to do. And very often, if you wanted to be carrying the grandchildren or getting off the floor without crawling off the floor, you're going to lose 30 to 40% of your strength before you get to that point. So you've got to kind of have it a bit up here to start with. And it's also just making sure it's all connected, which is why our rehab team is one of the biggest teams here. I've always said it's about functionally being able to move and to get stronger in the right way. Because if you're like my friend at the Spitfire Cafe, for all the will in the world, no, he's not able to do what he's doing now. Even the chap that I'm helping as well, the other chap that came in, is the fact that he will be able to do more stuff. But it's making sure you have that strength and ability and you don't let that drop. The Americans call it a downward spiral. You do less, so you become less able, you become less able, so you do less. And it is just making sure you're taking it in the right direction. Now, the reason there's a few more bits in this, sleep and genetics. And, genetics is one of those things where, yes, you can look at it. Are you going to be affected by your parents' genes? Yes. Can you change your genes? No, but you can change the way they react to you. So you can do stuff in. Sleep, it's a big thing, but again, I'll go into that. We're doing more work on that. We're actually working with the university on that because they're doing a study on that at the moment. One of the big factors here that we can bring together to make sure that you increase that health span is making sure that it's all brought together. And that's kind of the reason for this. It's bringing all those bits together and relating them to you. So it's a bit like, so we just talked, you've done something now that most people will never, ever, ever do. They've never looked to that 85-year-old over here. Never thought about it because we're so busy over here. Now, the challenge about that is by not looking, I'm probably out of the shot now, aren't I? By not looking over here, first of all, we don't know where we are here. First of all, we're going to have a look here and go, where are we? What's going on? It's no use hiding away from what we're doing. Let's get an idea, whether it's strength, whether it's stability, whether it's down to how much cholesterol I have at the moment, good, bad, or ugly. It's then saying that's where I decided to be and that's what I want to do. And then it's mapping a journey between the two. Just going, how do I get from here to there and clearing it out? It's a bit like anyone I used to play these old video games where as you discover the territory, it opened the flog and you kind of see what was going on. The challenge is if you don't look at what's going on and you just stay where you are, you don't know what's going on the other side of that wall. You're back down to the stranger in the house. If you're not planning your journey, you're not working through it, you're not putting the things in place, you're just leaving yourself as a victim to kind of randomness around you. So the first thing is to know. The first thing is to test. And there are some, without just doing the basic tests, there's some very effective ways to see how functional your body is. The next thing is to remove you from immediate danger. Because there will be some stuff you just have to do something about. So one of the chaps who was tested was, no, he was pre-diabetic. No idea. So it's how do I remove that immediate dangers? How do I get away from the thing that's already causing damage? The next bit is to line up the next priorities. Is to say, this isn't just about, all right, I've dealt with immediate danger. There's some stuff in here that could be a problem. And the advantage with doing things like bloods and that now is this isn't about illness and disease. This is about wellness. So there's some really nicely documented stuff. And when we send our bloods away now, is the fact they always have, by law, you have to have a doctor's report with it, which is great because the doctor will go through it. But you can also start picking up some of those precursors, some of the stuff that if someone has got a high blood glucose, resting blood glucose level, the chances are the uric acid's going to be up. So there's a few bits you can look through which are really relatively straightforward, and you can start putting your plan together. You can start looking at the way you eat. It may be the fact that you go to the doctor, and this is again, we did this a lot in the US. Was the fact you'd write a form for the doctor, and when they take it to the doctor, they go, "Thank you very much," and you decide what you want to do. But it comes down to you. You're the pilot of the ship. We can guide you, and we can create different things that you need, but very often it's your decision. So you've got that. So you say, "Do I want to be medicated? Don't I?" That sometimes you run across, you run across situations where someone is medicated and they want to medicate them again, but actually without any exercise intervention. And reading through a lot of these texts, what the commonality of it is, exercise is a very strong part of this. You can really make a difference in what you're doing. And again, it's strange because all of you in this room are already kind of doing that anyway. But when you start looking around you, even when you just sit back down to the Blue Water or the Lakeside Food Hall, you see people who are a lot younger who are going to already be in trouble. Start to set yourself up for your journey. I know it's difficult to get your head around, but when I looked at this and it was close to what Kevin was talking about, was the fact that when I'm doing this now, I'm buying cuddles with my grandchildren. It gives me more. the more I do this, the more credit I get. And that's just the way I look at it. And I can really work with that. And just from the fact that I've already seen the difference. And then what it is, and this is, and I'll talk about what we're doing now, but it's being able to keep an eye on that and use it as a guide. It's not like using a Speedo. It's not like taking the information and just going, okay, I'm going to forget it now. It's about getting hold of it and saying, all right, well, now how do I utilize this? How do I bring it into my exercise? How do I bring it into my nutrition? Because again, we don't want to get back to the apathy bit. Once we know, and as I said, I'm not a hippie on this. This isn't hot air. It's just science, and it's been around for a long time. It's just coming a bit more to a head, and technology's become more available. A lady the other day said to me, so what did people used to do before they had the VO2? I said, well, actually, the people who could pay for it would have it. I used to use an estimated one, and athletes used to use it, and they used it for something different. We just get to use it for what we need. Now, there was a quote here from John F. Kennedy. He said, "Repair the roof while the sun's shining." And I think that's the bit I'd like you to think about with this. This is all about trying to do it before it becomes an issue. And again, it's not scaremongering, but you'll be surprised what you find when you do these. And blood tests now, private blood tests, they're going crazy. They're one of the most common things coming out. I remember I got mine done, when my friend passed. And the woman said, oh, when I went to an NHS hospital, because I took the little box and she does my blood and put it in the post. And she said, we're doing a lot more of these now. So people are actually taking charge. They're not just leaving it to chance. So what just to finish up, what have we done in relation to this? We've pretty much taken the whole of the bit upstairs on this side, and we've put together a testing suite now, which we're finishing off, because I believe in doing this seriously if we're going to do it, and it's worthwhile doing. We've formed an official partnership with the company in Iceland, who say they've done just over 7,000 VO2 tests on this, and they've got a really refreshing way of looking at it from a health point of view. I don't know if any of you have been to Iceland. They're pretty keen on their health and keeping themselves in shape, and it's nice to be working with a company that you can kind of fire ideas off. We introduced gas analyzers, which some of you here have done, and some of you on your second trip on them. We've started to integrate bloods into what we're doing, and that really relates on literally, again, I was doing this 30 years ago. It was the fact that, again, we used to take them ourselves from finger prick, but it was the main cholesterol, blood glucose, test the blood pressure, do the girth diameter. And it's just the fact now where we're saying to clients, look, you know what, this is something you need to do. But the advantage with technology now is I've got one of the private GP clinics coming up, so we can tailor the blood test. So you only have to just pop down there to get it done, or you can get it done at your own GP, depending on whether they're happy to do that and share your data with you. Or you can do it, what we're doing with someone called MediChecks, where you buy a kit, you take it to probably your local GP. Even the local GPs sell them now. If you ever go on your My GP site, they sell the test depending on what you want them, and whether it's kind of related to kind of thyroid and testosterone, if you're looking at menopause-based issues, or it's related to a full battery, just to get an idea of where you are at the moment. All you do is take the blood, you pop in a first-class post box, and it comes back. Whoops, I've got mine somewhere on my phone, so it's on my app, and I actually took it to my doctor, and she went, "Oh, thank you very much." She works through it and sees what's going on. There's a lot more now on. I've been working with a Whole Foods company. Oh, this sound like a hippie, doesn't it? And rather than a health foods company, it's a fact where you buy your organic oats, you get it's basically your organic food. So I buy my oat bran, wheat bran, rye, barley. It's what got my cholesterol down. I wasn't going in buying any tablets or anything, even though the dietitian's given me supplements to take. But it's the fact that it would be nice, as much as we sell grenade bars and very interesting coloured shakes, to start. And I'm going to look at, these guys are in Canterbury, I'm going to look at trying getting something so you can, if you want to lower your cholesterol and you want to bring that fibre through and you want to bring that down naturally, there is a way to do it. But it's kind of bringing a little bit more of that in. And And then it's just giving you guys a chance to map out where you are now, where you want to go. And this is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. And now having the technology to do it is just giving you the information to make your own choices with it. Now, I want you, when you do your fitness work, to know what you're working to. I want you to be to know that you're in a situation where you're increasing your capacity. You're in a situation where you know when you're exercising, you are actually burning the fat, and you are actually getting in a situation where your heart won't have to work as hard when you come up to something else. And you if there are any things in there that you're worried about, you've chatted to your doc, or your eating plan mimics that, because really that's the whole factor of health and wellness.